Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
You know how sometimes you're at the grocery store and you see all those amazing vegetables
Mm,
and you think, I could totally grow these myself.
yeah.
But then you're like, wait a minute, do I even know the first thing about gardening?
It can feel intimidating, right?
Totally. And that's what I love about the guide we're diving into today. Huerto para Principiantes, 10 consejos.
Garden for beginners. 10 tips.
Exactly. It's all about taking those first steps and actually succeeding, even if you've never planted a single thing in your life.
It's about setting yourself up for success from the get-go.
Absolutely. And they don't sugarcoat things either. They come right out and say its sunlight is crucial.
It really is the foundation of a thriving garden.
We always hear about that 6 hours of sun rule,
Mm.
but is it really that make or break?
It's absolutely essential. Think about it this way. Those 6 hours of direct sunlight are like giving your plants a supercharged energy drink.
Okay, I like that analogy.
It's not just about the amount of sun, though. It's also about the type.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So morning sun, for instance, it's like that perfect cup of coffee. Gentle, energizing, ideal for delicate seedlings or leafy greens.
Okay.
But those juicy tomatoes you dream of, they might crave a couple of hours of that intense afternoon sun.
So that's what I've been doing wrong. My tomato plants never seem to thrive.
It could be the type of sunlight they're getting.
This is where I always struggled. I'd see a sunny patch in the morning and think I'd struck gold, only to realize it's completely shaded by noon.
Exactly. You've got to become a sunlight detective.
A sunlight detected.
Yes, spend a day observing how light moves through your space before you even think about planting.
That's such a good tip.
You might be surprised by what you discover. And here's the thing, even if you're limited on space, don't give up on gardening just yet.
What do you mean?
Balconies, window boxes, even striking up a deal with that friend who has the sun-drenched yard.
I love that.
So creative.
Where there's a will and a little ingenuity, there's a way to welcome some greenery into your life.
I am all about that. Now, speaking of things that can make or break your garden, let's talk about drainage.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
I learned this the hard way last year. My tomatoes basically had a pool party.
Oh, no.
And not the fun kind. They were drowning.
Poor drainage can be a silent garden killer.
It can really sneak up on you.
We see puddles and think, oh, that's not good. But it's the hidden consequences that are truly detrimental. Like what?
Root rot, for one. It's essentially plant suffocation.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's nutrient depletion. And to top it off, poorly drained soil can become a haven for pests.
That's good to know. So how do we prevent this drainage disaster from happening?
Well, this guide has a fantastic solution: raised garden beds.
Raised beds. Okay, I've heard of those, but I always thought they were more for experienced gardeners.
Not at all. What's great about raised beds is their simplicity and versatility. They're surprisingly approachable to build, even for those new to DIY.
Really?
And the best part? You're in complete control of your soil composition, which is a game changer if you've ever struggled with heavy clay or, poor drainage.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've covered sunlight and drainage.
Yeah,
Two crucial elements for a thriving garden.
absolutely. And you know what? I think it's time for our listeners to take a little inventory.
What do you mean?
Look around your own space. Where's that prime sunlight real estate? Any potential drainage red flags?
I love that idea. Let's turn this deep dive into action. Okay, so we've got our sunlight detective hats on. We've tackled the drainage dilemma.
Now it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty.
The actual dimensions of our garden beds.
Exactly. This is where things get surprisingly specific.
Right. The guide gives this very precise recommendation: a maximum width of 50 to 60 centimeters for beds you can access from one side.
And there's a good reason for that.
Okay, I have to admit my initial thought was, is my measuring tape even that precise?
It's all about outsmarting potential problems. Think about it.
Okay.
If your bed's too wide, you'll end up doing the garden equivalent of a tightrope walk just to reach those middle plants.
Makes sense.
And all that stretching and reaching compacts the soil.
So we're aiming for that Goldilocks zone. Not too wide, not too narrow.
Exactly. You want to keep things accessible for both you and your plants.
So interesting how these seemingly small details can make such a big difference.
It's all about working with nature's rhythms, not against them.
Which brings us to another topic. I'm a little nervous to talk about composting.
Composting. I get it. It can seem intimidating.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Like something only super experienced gardeners do.
This guide does a great job of demystifying it.
Okay, good. Because I always imagine smelly bins and way too many worms.
It doesn't have to be that way. A well-maintained compost pile is a thriving ecosystem, not a pest magnet.
Okay, that's reassuring.
And the guide breaks it down into manageable steps. starting with what you have on hand, kitchen scraps, yard waste, and you let nature work its magic.
So we're basically recycling our kitchen scraps into gardening gold.
Precisely.
I like the sound of that.
Hmm.
And the guide emphasizes starting your compost now, even before you plant anything.
The sooner the better. That way you'll have nutrient-rich compost ready to go when it's time to plant.
So it's like we're giving our future plants a head start.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm convinced composting it is. Now let's talk about another step that I tend to rush through, seed starting.
Ah, yes, seed starting. The ultimate act of patience for us eager gardeners.
Right, because why not just pop those seeds straight into the ground?
Well, this guide reframed seed starting for me. They describe it as giving your plants a fighting chance.
A fighting chance.
Especially in unpredictable climates or if pests are a concern. It's like giving those delicate seedlings a head start in a controlled environment.
So instead of throwing them straight into the deep end of the garden.
Exactly. You're giving them a little spa vacation first, making sure they're strong and resilient.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So we've covered sunlight, drainage, bed dimensions, composting, and seed starting.
We're on a roll.
We are. But as any seasoned gardener knows, the real journey begins with ongoing care.
Absolutely. That's where observation and intuition really come into play. It really is about tuning into those subtle cues your garden's giving you.
Learning to read between the leaves, so to speak.
Exactly. Like when it comes to watering,
Ah, watering. The eternal mystery.
this guide encourages us to get our hands dirty. Literally.
What do you mean?
Instead of sticking to a rigid watering schedule based on, a calendar or whatever,
Right.
we should be checking the soil moisture directly.
Okay. So how do we do that?
Easy. Just stick your finger about an inch into the soil.
Okay.
If it feels dry like a well-baked cake, it's time to water. If it's still damp, hold off, let those roots breathe a bit.
So simple, yet so effective. And speaking of things that can wreak havoc on our gardens, let's talk about pests.
Ah, yes. Every gardener's least favorite topic.
I know. It can feel like a losing battle sometimes.
Yeah.
But this guide offers a refreshing perspective.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Instead of waging war on pests, they encourage us to work with nature,
Okay, I like where this is going.
create a more balanced ecosystem.
So it's about prevention rather than just reaction.
Exactly. We talked about healthy plants being more resilient.
Right, like giving them the best possible defense system.
And that starts with those fundamentals. Sunlight, watering, nutrient-rich soil.
It all ties together.
It really does.
Yeah.
But let's say we do find ourselves facing a pest problem. What's our next move?
Early intervention is key. And this guide is all about natural pest control methods whenever possible.
Like what?
Well, for instance, a simple solution of soapy water can work wonders on aphids and other common garden pests.
Soapy water.
Huh, who knew? And for more persistent issues, that's where companion planting comes in.
We touched on that earlier, and I have to say I'm intrigued.
It's fascinating stuff. Basically, you're strategically planting different species together to deter pests.
So, like planting basil next to your tomatoes to repel whiteflies.
Exactly, or interspersing marigolds among your vegetables to confuse a whole host of insects.
Wow, nature is amazing.
It really is. And you know what else is amazing?
Yeah.
This guide reminds us that gardening should be enjoyable.
Yes, it's easy to get caught up in all the technicalities.
But at the end of the day, it's about creating a garden that brings you joy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what vegetables do you love to cook with? What would make you excited to step into your garden each day?
It's your own little slice of paradise.
Exactly. And for those just starting out, the guide recommends fast-growing, easy-to-care-for plants, like leafy greens.
Quick wins to build confidence.
Exactly. And if space is limited, herbs and cherry tomatoes are perfect for vertical gardens.
There's a gardening solution for everyone.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I have to say I'm feeling incredibly inspired.
Me too. It's amazing how much we can learn from a simple guide.
Right. It all comes down to taking that first step. And remember, gardening is a journey, not a race.
Absolutely. Start small, experiment, and most importantly, have fun.
And with that, I think it's time for us to sign off.
Until next time, happy gardening, everyone.
Happy gardening.